Okay, so the last time that we did a layout exercise, it was for the Module 4 assignment where we had a layout practice assignment. And it was color-coded, and we had to build all of these different structure pieces and give them some garish colors. And this was actually a fluid layout, which is really good for mobile devices. And so it stretches with whatever the size of the browser is. There are other ways that you can build websites. They're not as hard as building a mobile-friendly website, but they're also becoming less popular because most people are using mobile devices now. So I was a little hesitant to show you this, but I do feel like it helps you to understand how the structuring process works. So I wanted to give you a second example of a layout. So another type of layout besides just that fluid width is to do a fixed width, where it is a certain width and it stays that width in the browser or in a mobile device or whatever the case may be. So it doesn't resize depending on the screen size. But this will really help you see how I start creating structure. So what I usually do is I start with a wireframe that I created or the mock-up that has all the colors and imagery, but sometimes it's easier with just the wireframe. I'm an illustrator. You can use Word. You can sketch this out on a piece of paper and then just use markers. But I like to decide, okay, what structures or what code is going to go around this to actually build this site. And we usually work from the top down and from left to right. And so I have all my stuff locked on this top layer, and then the underneath layers where I'm going to start doing some big color boxes. So I'll go ahead and change this color, and I'm going to just draw a box, and this is not what it'll look like on a website. It won't even look like it has a box here, but just by adding this color in this box, it's going to help me to code it. So I'm going to add this box, and it's underneath. Let's see. I need to actually put, like, I want this white part to be actually on the website, but that then needs to go under that. And then this needs to go under that. There we go. Okay, so now we're back in business. Okay, so this blue area, this is going to be a certain tag called header. So I'm going to put that in italics. So I know it's not actually going to be on the site. It's just going to be a note to myself. I'm going to put that right here. So I know that this is going to be the header tag and it's going to include the logo. So then the next thing I am going to create is the nav, and we'll give that a garish color. And we're going to move that note down and put nav. And I usually like to put it just in the top left corner so that it can easily tell what code should start that section. So then again, I'm going to draw another another rectangle, and this is going to house my slider. Now there's not a tag for slider or slideshow or hero image. So if we don't have a tag for that specific thing, then what we use is something called, let's see, I'm going to turn this. What we use is something called a div tag. So a div tag is like an empty, basic, generic container, and we give it a special name by using the ID equals quote, quote, and then we close that, and I'm going to call this slideshow. So this is the code I know that I'm going to use to make the slideshow. So again, because this says nav, it has its own special tag, but there is no special tag for slideshow. So we have to use a generic div, which is like a divider, or it's just basically a generic container. And then we give it a unique ID so that when I'm looking through the code and I see a bunch of divs, I know that this div is slideshow, this div is footer or events or whatever the case may be. So because these things stack one on top of the other, they're going to be really easy to add to our layout. Where things start to get tricky is when things sit left to right. Now in that first layout, what we had was just one sidebar to the left and then the content to the right. This time we have all of our content to the left, and then we have a sidebar to the right, but it actually has two different boxes inside of it. So what we're going to do for that is we are actually going to start again working from top to bottom, left to right. So since we're working down and this is on the left, we're going to do our section right here. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a container around all that like section. And I'm again going to grab my note and say, okay, this here is going to be the section tag. And then this over here, we're going to add, put it underneath and call it, let's just do hot pink for right now. And this whole thing is going to be an aside. Okay, so now within that aside, we actually have two different containers, one for events and one for featured. Now, we don't have an events or a featured tag that we can use. So again, if we don't have one of those tags, what we need to do is we need to, let's go ahead and make our own second container in here. And I'm going to do a different opposite color so it's a little bit easier to see. And then I'm going to do another one down here. Oops. Cancel, click off. I'm going to do another one down here. What color haven't I used? Let's just do like a, well, we kind of have one over there. I'm running out of colors. Let's just do that. Okay. So for these, we are going to use divs just like we did for the slideshow. And the ID this time for these should be, again, something unique. So let's double click and type div ID equals, and I'm just going to call this events and that. Hopefully you can see what I'm typing there. So this one, if you haven't guessed, is going to be the generic div, but the ID will be featured. So you can imagine as you're looking through the code, you'll be able to tell which container contains all of the events because I've given it an ID of events. Again, if I just had generic div, you'd not be able to tell which one is events, which one's featured, which one is slideshow. So last but not least, we are going, well, actually, it's not the last. That's actually untrue. We'll go ahead and make the footer. So then the footer does have its own tag. So I'm going to make that white so it's easier to see, and type footer. So this helps me to see all the different tags that I'll need to create this structure. Now the last thing we need to do is something called a wrapper. And what a wrapper does is it's this white area right here, and it contains all of the stuff inside of it so that it either sits, well, it's going to make it so our website sits in the middle. It's going to make it so our website is at least 960 pixels wide. And that wrapper can be exactly 960 pixels wide, or you can tell it to be like 80%. So you can do some of that like liquid width if you want to. And the reason why I want to do that is because I want to be able to have a big image back here or a pattern back here or some cool design back here. So this is what we call the wrapper, and we don't have an actual tag for this. So we are again going to just use our generic, and I'll zoom in on this real quick. And we're going to call this div ID of wrapper. So we know that the wrapper is going to sit around all of the content in our website. So now what we need to do in the next tutorial video is we're going to actually start creating this structure. So you're going to want to create a new HTML page with a linked CSS, and then you're going to start going from the wrapper, header, nav, slideshow, section, aside, those two in the aside, and then finally the footer. And then we'll do that in that video where we add some CSS.